just another day of trying to fix any kind of issues with the stream. You know how it is. It's not a fat dog stream if I'm not fixing some sort of technical difficulties. Alrighty. Whoa. Welcome back. Alright, let me pull up the actual stream. Ugh. Whew boy. Okay. I do actually have updates for some abridging content stuff, Slime specifically. Um, got a couple more things recorded on Slime. We have 3 characters left that still need to be like recorded, and Calvin wants to redo his Ranga dialogue because he doesn't like his Ranga. He doesn't like how it sounds. So he wants to re-record it. It's not the performance that he gave; it's the sound around everything, or maybe some of it is his performance. He's like, I want to redo it. It doesn't sound that great, and I'm like, okay. He's got to record for another character anyway, so might as well redo it and just do everything all at once. And then there's 2 other characters, but one of those characters only has 1 line. So it's not like a heavy amount of stuff, but I want to make sure I have all the audio before I start cutting everybody's takes and then sending it over to start getting worked on. That is what's going on with Slime. And it's still going to take a while, guys, because we have to record singing. And of course, that requires that we be able to pay people. And so everybody's like, oh, take your time. And we're like, all right, here's the thing. We don't want to take our time. We'd rather get this out sooner. The delay is that we can't afford to pay people. It's not like, oh, we got to take our time for this, that, and the other. And that's half of what that video is about. And apparently I didn't clarify enough. Everybody's like, oh, a lot of the comments, while they're good and well-intentioned, I don't think, maybe I just didn't get across the message I was trying to get across. The reason things are going slowly is because we don't have the money to make them go quicker. That's what's slowing everything down. It's budget. We don't have the budget to be able to quickly to get done in a timely manner. I wouldn't even say quickly, just in a timely manner. If we have the money to actually pay all of the people to do the song and the credits, we could easily get this done in like a month. It's not, but it's going to take several months because we have to wait to pay everybody individually. And that is the problem. So it's not a, oh man, don't rush a project kind of thing because we don't want it to be bad or we're under a lot of stress. That's not what's happening. That's not even remotely what's happening. And maybe I should make another video clarifying. I don't like it when people bitch at me for how long something has taken, but at the same time, 100%, and I'm going to say this to, I'm going to say this from now on to everybody that complains that Slime is taking so long to put out, or this, that, and the other, about how long an abridged episode comes out. First off, we'll do it at our own pace. Thank you very much. And secondly, if you want it quicker, if you don't like the fact that it's coming out so long from the previous episode, well, guys, guess what? That's your fault. Just that simple. It is. If you're mad at how long it's taking, a lot of that is now your fault because it takes us a lot of time to make a lot of the stuff that we make, but not that much time. The thing that's slowing us down is budget, and we don't have a budget because we don't have enough patrons. So yeah, I don't think I hammered that point home enough. Apparently I thought I was pretty clear about that, but maybe I wasn't. I don't know. But yeah, that's the thing that is slowing Slime down. We don't have the budget to get all the things done that we need to get done. And if we had the budget for it, it would be done. So, once again, the thing that's slowing Slime down is money. Because we have to pay our editors. We have to pay for multiple legal reasons. We have to pay our actors that do singing for us. Even though we can't pay a lot, we'd like to pay more, but we don't have the budget for it. And even the little that we're able to pay, we barely have the budget from that from month to month. So it's like we have to pay one person each month. So say we have 6 to 8 people singing, right? That means it's going to take 6 to 8 months to pay everybody off. So we can't record their stuff until the month. Like how we're doing it is we're not asking people to sing and then we're paying them as time goes on. No, we're not having them do any kind of stuff. We're not having them sing, record any kind of singing until we can afford to pay them, because we don't want to get in any kind of legal trouble. It's simple as that. So if it takes another 8 months to get slime out, you now know the reason why. We can't afford it, and we can't go digging into our own pockets because we've already exhausted our own personal supplies of finances. That's it. That's the reason why. There you go. If you want it out faster, please consider becoming a patron. It's just that simple. All right. Maybe I should make a video just stating all of that. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. That's more or less it. And I don't know how other abridged crews do their thing. I just know how we're doing it, and I'm the director of Slime, so this is how I'm doing it. And it's mostly because I don't want to get Fat Dog in any kind of trouble legally. I want to cover our bases. Make sure that we are safe. Everybody has been paid for their work and they're happy. I don't want anybody saying that we were mismanaging funds or any of that kind of stuff. I don't even want to have the semblance of financial impurity or whatever. I can't think of a good word for it. I don't want anybody having a hint that we're misappropriating and misusing funds. I want to make sure that is all taken care of. I want to be as forthright with everybody as possible. I hope I'm using all those words correctly. You'd think I'd be better at this. I'm a writer, but you know, for all my desires, my words fail me a lot more often than you'd think. Alrighty. Updates are done on that front. We will be having a I'll probably be looking into more news articles and stuff later, but we already have 4 pretty big topics to discuss tomorrow for Anime Church, so hope you're looking forward to that. And there's some behind the scenes talks about like some goofy gaming projects that we could be bringing to Twitch very soon, Fat Dog wise, with some people of Fat Dog. Technically, I guess you could say all of us are Fat Dogs. Knows big words, use small words. But yeah, we're looking at doing some proper gaming content on a weekly basis here with a bunch of goofy assholes. Do Twitch donations go to that? Not unless there's a specific donation for that, Fenris. No. Specifically right now, Patreon is the way that Fat Dog makes money for all of its projects. Unless we have a specific dono for that, which I did consider and think about, but right now we really need to plug the Patreon because our Patreon has gone down by half, so we can't afford a lot of the projects that we were working on that maybe we needed to be more vocal about so that you knew where your money's going to. I'm a big proponent that we need to be more active on our Patreon, have weekly updates, stuff like that, things that only our patrons get to see. I think we should be doing that, being more active. This is a discussion. This is more of a discussion that I think Tony and I should have with many others on Fat Dog just kind of like, hey, all of us gathering together and talking about the projects and be like, hey, should we do like weekly roundups, updates, or at least monthly, you know? Just kind of touching base and being like, hey, this is how your money's spent. I'm trying to be as upfront with everybody because we did lose quite a lot. I don't want to know, I don't want to go into too many specifics and I can't give you numbers. But suffice to say, we're down to half of what we were. And I know it sounds bitchy and complainy, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because it kind of brought a lot of projects that we were excited and working on kind of to a halt because you need funding to keep those projects moving. And that's what the Patreon is for. So the Patreon is the most important thing. Everything else, like Twitch, Super Chat, donations, stuff like that, it's all secondary. However, if we need to do donations in order to get something done, trust me, I will talk to Tony about it. I will get it put up on Twitch, YouTube, all those things. All right, so now that I've cried about Patreon, you know somebody's going to come over here and be like, oh, you're just crying for money. Yeah, kind of. I'm like, bro, it's kind of my livelihood depends on it. I get paid from Patreon, from the Fat Dog Patreon. All the work that I do gets paid from Patreon. And I do a lot of work. And I'm grateful for any amount that I get. But a lot of content that I put out kind of gets slowed down if we don't have revenue for it. And again, it's going mostly to the projects. I don't take a lot. Like, the amount of money that I get is very negligible. Twitch money is pretty much the only Fat Dog thing that I, like, completely, like, I don't have to argue about percentages. Well, I'm not really arguing about percentages in general. I don't think I ever have. But I don't do the I don't have to worry a lot about Twitch stuff because Twitch is kind of almost all me. I don't want to get into it, guys. This is probably going to get cut out of all YouTube stuff. That having been said, though, guys, thank you so much. I like money. If I could make money from crying, I would cry the ugliest and loudest cry you have ever seen. Well, that's certainly a thing. It's not money that I like. It's being able to live and pay my bills and eat food and, like, keep making cool things. Money is, like, what you need to do that. That money itself is not something that I actually give a shit about. This whole PSA should be this whole intro should just be titled "I promise I'm not greedy." All right. That having been said, guys, let's actually get to reading some books because that's more of a fun time. All right. So here we are, Chapter 4. Mind Made Up. I used the ring Orsted gave me to contact him. About an hour later, I received a letter telling me to meet him outside my cottage, off to the side. Apparently, he'd still been nearby when I reached out. He could have just come to see me instead of sending a letter. In any case, I did as he commanded and set out to meet him at the agreed-upon location. I arrived to find him with his arms crossed, looking as if he'd nodded off. He had obviously been waiting for me. I felt a bit guilty for not hurrying here sooner. Sorry I made you wait so long, I said. No, I arrived only moments ago. We sounded like a couple who had just started dating. Anyway, I filled him in on the events since we'd last met, starting with our new guardian beast, Leo. He saw no issue with that. In fact, he was shocked that such an important animal had heeded my summons. He guaranteed me that my family's security was assured with a sacred beast guarding them. Apparently, Leo was more of a big shot than I realized. It really got my attention when he mumbled to himself, "Perhaps Roxy's child is special after all." I grinned when I heard that. I also suggested having Cliff to try to remove his curse. Orsted seemed willing to give it a shot. Under this arrangement, Cliff would come to the cottage every few days to work on developing a magical implement that could combat his curse. Since we had no idea when we would see the fruits of Cliff's labors, I told Orsted that I would keep up the guise that he was holding my family hostage in the meantime. He kept a poker face through my explanation, then merely nodded. "All right." Come on, man. Move over. There we go. When I admitted that I hadn't yet reached out to Ariel, he reprimanded me. I could have told him that I was worried about Eris and Leo, or that I was waiting for a good opportunity to introduce Ghislaine to Ariel, since it would be perfect for getting close to her, but those would simply be excuses. I had taken the month's leeway we had for granted. I could admit I'd been negligent. Orsted had gone to meet with Perugius while I was taking my sweet time. He requested that Perugius support Ariel's bid for the crown, but had been refused. Perugius stubbornly insisted that he would not change his stance until he was certain she was fit for the position. You have some balls, Lord Perugius. You seem pretty terrified of Orsted, but you still rebuffed him in no uncertain terms. Gotta admire you for that. That aside, I told Orsted about Luke's visit. I also mentioned that his plea for help could be on the man god's behalf, and brought up how worried I was about helping Ariel out. Finally, I asked him if he had any intention of changing his original plan. Undaunted, Orsted said, "No, we will make Ariel king." He dismissed the possibility that the man god wanted this outcome. Ariel had been on the throne, Ariel being on the throne was of paramount importance to him. When I asked how we should deal with Luke, Orsted didn't have an immediate answer. After several minutes of contemplation, he finally mumbled, "Perhaps we should kill him." I gaped. Those were terrifying words to just say casually. "You're going to kill him?" Orsted was silent, but the look on his face was terrifying. Wait, no. That's just how he always looks. He dropped his gaze to the table and stared, or glared, as far as I was concerned, at one specific spot. Yep, I changed my mind. He's definitely making a scary face. "There's no telling what the man god's apostles might do. Killing him would be the best way to eradicate any uncertainty," said Orsted. "I guess so." Kill Luke? I should have already steeled myself to do whatever was necessary, but I couldn't stop my stomach from knotting up in anxiety. Luke was working so hard to help Ariel, and we were going to kill him? Despite everything I had achieved and done, I had never killed anyone before. Sure, a bunch of bandits got caught in my spell back when we were in Begarit, and some of them probably died, but I hadn't looked them in the eyes as I did it. So my first kill was going to be Luke? This was going to be my introduction to murder? The thought made my blood run cold. At the same time, part of me felt like I had no other choice. If he was going to be an enemy and pose a threat to my family and I, it was best to get rid of him. I couldn't let my emotions get in the way. It might come back later to bite me in the butt. But can I really justify taking someone's life simply because I had no other choice? I wasn't trying to preach morality here, but the idea didn't sit right with me. I was clearly more opposed to the idea of killing than I even realized, considering how much I recoiled at the thought. "We're not sure that he's one of the man god's apostles yet, right?" I said, my voice straining with empty hope. Orsted shook his head. "No, given the timing of Luke's actions, there could be no doubt that he is." What do you mean by that?" "Their attempts to negotiate with Perugius have not completely fallen through yet, and news about the king falling sick has yet to reach them. Yet Luke chose this particular moment to seek you out. It's clearly the man god's doing." Orsted spat the last words with disgust. He really does despise the man god with every fiber of his being. "In that case, why would he ask me to help Ariel?" I asked. "Shouldn't he be doing the opposite? If he doesn't want Ariel to be king, then he should be trying to keep me away from her." He likely seeks to control someone from the Asura kingdom in order to lead us into a trap. Right now, the man god cannot see you directly, which is why he's using Luke. It's his way of keeping an eye on you. Think of it like someone putting their ear to a wall to hear what's happening on the other side. So Luke is monitoring me? It's possible that's not all he's doing, said Orsted. There's a chance he might try something at some point. It's a safer bet to get rid of him. It was possible that I might give away Orsted's aim through my actions or words. Little wonder, then, why the man god decided to have someone surveil me. It would be impossible to keep Luke entirely out of the loop as I assisted Ariel with her goal. Let's assume for a moment that we did kill Luke, I said. Are you sure this won't negatively impact Her Highness or anyone else? Orsted narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? I started analyzing the possible repercussions of murdering Luke based off of what Orsted had told me. You mentioned some guy. Derek Redbat, I think his name was originally supposed to become Prime Minister, but he's no longer with us. With his absence, it's highly likely Ariel is completely dependent upon Luke for moral support. Ariel certainly did rely on him, although she had no other retainers like Sylphie. Although she had other retainers like Sylphie, Luke played the biggest role among her immediate supporters. It wasn't affection or romance, but something similar to the bond I shared with Cliff and Zenoba. No matter what happened, I was confident they would never betray me. Ariel likely felt the same way about Luke. The man god may have considered that we'd discover his connection with Luke. Perhaps his entire aim is to goad us into killing him, I said. There was no telling what might happen to Ariel if Luke died. Humans were weak. No matter how tough they seemed on the outside, they were fragile enough to fall apart under the right conditions. I had some personal experience with this. I'd completely lost my way, lost sight of myself, when Paul died. Of course, if all we wanted was a puppet, perhaps we would be better off without Luke. I studied Orsted's expression as I conducted my internal debate. The man finally nodded in agreement. His face was no less terrifying than it had been before. That's perfectly possible. The Ariel that I knew valued Luke greatly. Without him, she may not succeed on the path towards kingship. Clearly, he also didn't want a lifeless doll on the throne. So I think we should leave Luke to his own devices. For the moment, I said. Yeah, okay, that was partly because I didn't want to kill him, but Luke was also one of Sylphie's best friends, as well as my cousin. The two of us weren't very close, but we had enough of a connection that I didn't want him dead. On top of that, I also had a personal aversion to killing him in the first place. Perhaps having sensed that, Orsted quickly replied, All right, we'll do as you advise then. Thank you. I dodged a bullet there, but we might still have to kill Luke in the end. If it came down to that, Sylphie might resent me for it. It might even lead to a divorce. That thought made my stomach knot up. Even so, I had to steel myself, just in case I had to cross that bridge eventually. Anyway, that takes care of the business with Luke. While I was on the subject, there were some other questions on my mind, too. You mentioned before that the man god can't control a bunch of people at once, right? I asked. About how many can he control at once? Orsted had briefly mentioned in passing that the man god couldn't control a whole crowd at once, but that meant he could control more than one, right? I cannot give you a precise number, but it's most likely around 3 people. Only 3, huh? Less than I expected. What are the odds he can control more than that? I asked. Not impossible. But when he attempted to kill me, he only employed 3 people to do so. None of the others came directly after me. We are probably safe to assume it's just 3. Which 3 were these? The Sword God, the North God, and a Demon King. And apparently Orsted had turned the tables on all of them. A Demon King in addition to 2 of the 7 great powers, huh? If even that kind of firepower wasn't enough to get rid of Orsted, it's no wonder the man god gave up on that route. If he sicked those kinds of people on me, I probably wouldn't stand a chance, although if he could have, he probably already would have. I suspected he was instead slowly altering people's destinies over long periods, as he did with me. He'd probably be a big fan of Rube Goldberg machine videos. Oh, okay. I wonder why he can only take control of 3, I muttered. Because that's the limit of his foresight abilities. You mean he can only look into 3 people's futures at any time? And any more than that is impossible? Correct. I wondered if that meant he might be able to control 4 people, assuming he didn't look into their futures. Nah, someone who can cheat and look into the future would never gamble by giving up on that specific power. It was reasonable to assume he would only control 3 people and no more. So if Luke is one of those 3, that means he's got 2 others under his control, I surmised. There's no evidence at all that he's controlling 3 people right now. I shrugged. You may be right, but I think there's a good chance that he's got at least 1 person under his thumb in the Asura Kingdom. Why do you think that? Asked Orsted. If the man god truly wanted Ariel to take the throne, then it makes sense for him to control someone who opposes her and someone working alongside her. Perfect for collecting and disseminating information, right? The man god doesn't need to go that far to... No. I suppose there is some value in reporting your movements to the opposition. Despite his initial dismissal, Orsted managed to talk himself into agreeing with me. But now that I thought about it, the man god could see into people's hearts. Perhaps he didn't need to gather information. Although Ariel's future prospects were obscured from his view thanks to my presence, having someone who could keep an eye on us was more than enough for him. It's perfectly possible he's involved in something else entirely. Oh, no, sorry. It's perfectly possible he's involved in something else entirely, I acknowledged. Like, maybe he's waiting to attack my family when I leave the house or something. With the sacred beast serving as your family's guardian, the man god cannot readily go after them. That creature has enough power that you needn't worry about that. I stared at him. More than Aramanfi? Orsted snorted. Perugius's spirits don't even begin to compare. Wait, what? Holy shit! It was hard to believe what he was saying when Leo had yet to prove himself, but this was the dragon god speaking. Surely I could trust what he was saying. Honestly, I had no way of knowing either way. I digress, said Orsted. You were likely right about the man god having a puppet in the kingdom. I nodded. Then the key to victory will be sniffing this person out, I assume. Indeed. I know nothing of his third apostle, assuming he even has one. It could be that this person is operating separately and is unrelated to the Asuran throne. Keep your guard up. In order to achieve victory against the man god, we had to identify his 3 puppets, defeat them, and accomplish our own objectives in the process. We would probably have to repeat this process again and again. Our current goal was getting Ariel on the throne. Although it wasn't confirmed, Luke was most likely one of his lackeys. The identities of the other 2 remained a mystery. Is there anyone you know with absolute certainty is not on his side? I asked this knowing I was asking for the impossible. It didn't really matter who the man god's puppets were, our objectives wouldn't change. Still, if he assumed control over Zenobia or Cliff, and Orsted tasked me with killing them, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd be devastated. Your family is safe from his influence. In addition to the bracelet you wear, they are also under the Guardian Beast protection. And what about Cliff and Zenobia? After a pause, he said, They could be possible targets. Be careful around them. Seriously? That was not the answer I wanted to hear. Is there anything we can do to make sure they don't fall into his grasp? I asked. Orsted shook his head. No, if you find it necessary, you could warn them against heeding the words of someone who calls themselves the man god, though I doubt it would do you any good. No good, huh? Well, that puts me in a pickle. It was a problem of chance. The man god didn't attach himself to anyone and everywhere. All I could do was pray to a different god that Zenoba and Cliff wouldn't become one of his targets. For the moment, I said, changing the subject, I should work on getting Perugius' support to help Ariel on the path to kingship, right? That plan hasn't changed? Correct, though you should remain wary of the man god's apostle. If he starts proposing something, inform me immediately. Very well. At least our plan of attack remained the same for the moment. In any case, it seems Ariel herself has... Oh. In any case, it seems like Ariel has worked herself into quite the corner. I stroked my chin. From what I could tell, she has nothing with which to sway Perugius' opinion. Orsted merely grunted. Okay, so it should have been like that. The last time I was with the two of them, I believe he asked her what the necessary element for being a king is, and she wasn't able to answer adequately. Ah, yes. How very like Perugius to ask such a question. Do you happen to know the answer? I asked. Orsted glared at me. Yeep! You don't have to give me this evil eye. I get it. This is a hurdle she needs to overcome if she wants to be king, right? I have no idea, he said. However, the only person Perugius ever supported for the throne was Ganius Freenan Osira. If you research him, you should be able to find a clue to lead you to the right direction. Wait, so you don't know either? Well, I guess you gave me a hint at least. All right. Then I shall be off to see it done. It was the trump card I would use to get in contact with Ariel. Before I left, Orsted lent me one of his magical items. I say lend because he called it a gift, but I thought of it as equipment for work. It was a robe, and conveniently gray, even though I had no part in its creation. It was a little darker than the one I'd been wearing. That robe was worn by the great sage Titania a millennia ago, said Orsted. It's made from death adder rat skin. Woven with magically imbued thread, it has high magic resistance and is stab-proof. It likely became a magical item after being left in a labyrinth for an extended period, where it developed the ability to reduce the wearer's weight by half, meaning one can move like the wind if needed. Since you cannot use battle aura, it should prove useful. If his words were to be believed, it was quite the incredible item. So, I licked my lips, what kind of price would something like this fetch? I took this from the Dragon Folk's repository in the past few days since we last met. It would net you a decent amount if you sold it, but I am giving it to you so that you can protect yourself. Wear it. Oof, he read me like a book. I wondered what the Dragon Folk's repository was, but they did have a bunch of items like this. Did they have a bunch of items like this stored in there? They probably did. I could just picture it. Boots that could open any treasure chest they kicked, a trumpet that could uncover hidden rooms. At any rate, this robe would increase my combat proficiency. It was certainly a huge step down from my magic armor, but I could bridge that gap with my own knowledge and courage. Wait, but I have neither of those things. Oh, well, guess I'll just have to try my best anyway. At night, I summoned Sylphie to my room. If I was going to help Ariel, I needed to speak with my wife first. Sylphie must have sensed it was a serious matter because when she showed up, she was in her normal clothes rather than pajamas. That was fine with me, considering the topic I was about to broach. Well, Rudy, what is it you wanted to talk about? Sylphie asked, her expression guarded. I could hardly blame her for being wary. The last few times I formally called her in, it had been to relay what she must have thought was crazy talk. Sylphie, I'm going to be direct, I said. All right. I've been ordered to help Princess Ariel on their path to becoming king. She scowled suspiciously, then her face lit up. But almost as quickly, she was back to furrowing her brow again. Orsted? She echoed. That's right. Which means you're not doing it of your own free will. Orsted's the one calling the shots. Her demeanor changed completely. I had waffled back and forth between telling her the truth and about Orsted's involvement, but I had so much guilt about things I had but I had so much guilt about things I had done to her in the past. This time, at least, I wanted to trust her and speak the truth. This was one of her close friends we were talking about here. Sylphie gaped at me for a moment before snapping her jaw shut and narrowing her eyes. And what is his motive for making Princess Ariel king? Does he stand to benefit from that somehow? It will give him connections to the to Asura Kingdom through me. It doesn't seem like he wants something right now, but he may ask for assistance in the future. But he's the dragon god, the same one who beat you senseless even when you used your magic armor. I realize Asura Kingdom is regarded as the most powerful country in the world, but I still can't see why someone like him would want to foster such relations with them. There are some matters that can only be resolved by political influence and not force alone, I reasoned. It's only natural that Orsted would want that at his disposal, so he can make use of them. So he can make use of it when he needs it. Wow. Why is my eye just randomly watering? That's weird. This was merely groundwork. It was hard to explain, but making Ariel king would allow him to reap benefits in another 100 years. Orsted had an overall picture of how the future was supposed to play out. I had no idea how he would eventually make use of Ariel or if he would even utilize her at all. What I did know, based on what I'd read in my future self's journal, was that Ariel becoming king would inconvenience the man god. Thus, we would place her on the throne. Sure, part of this was to get under the man god's skin, but it was also a basic tenet of war not to let your opponent have their way. The whole plan meant far more to Orsted than me. In fact, it meant almost nothing to me. As far as I was concerned, the minuses outweighed the pluses. If I helped Ariel assume the throne, everyone would label me as one of her supporters, and that meant getting pulled into the sticky, corrupt mess that was aristocratic politics. Why did I suddenly lose my breath there? Corrupt mess that was aristocratic politics. Personally, getting a foot in the kingdom's door wasn't worth getting wrapped up in that. Oh, Rudy, how funny. No, my desire to help Ariel was purely personal. She had been there for me a lot, and it was time to repay her for that. Perhaps it was better not to think of pros and cons, but instead look at it in simpler terms. Ariel would be overjoyed if she became king. Sylvie would be overjoyed if her close friend managed to achieve her goal. And if we managed to stop the man god from having his way, Orsted would be satisfied. I stood to benefit too. Sylvie's love for me would deepen, and Orsted would be convinced of my usefulness. Yeah, that's the best way to think of it. Well, Orsted's future demands aside, at this point, I think Princess Ariel only stands to benefit, I said. Sylvie put a hand to her chin. Well, yes, I guess you're right. There are many unsavory characters in the Asura Kingdom, and if we think of it as pitting villains against villains, it's not a bad move. Yikes! Sylvie wasn't pulling any punches. I wondered what she really thought of Orsted. I could admit he looked like a bad guy, but did he look even more menacing and untrustworthy than I thought? Did he seem like the type of person who might kill someone upon first meeting them? Okay, I can't really argue with that. Princess Ariel should be the one to decide if we should accept his aid or not, she said, narrowing her eyes. Personally, I want a guarantee that he won't betray us. A guarantee? Yes. Why do you seem so sure he won't stab us in the back? I actually wasn't. In fact, he did seem to be hiding something from me, but he seemed more trustworthy than the man god, at least. If I summoned him, he came immediately. It's not that I think he won't, I said, but I do think he's sincere in his dealings with me. As long as I don't work against him and continue to make myself useful, I don't think he'll be our enemy. If you say so, she pursed her lips, not fully convinced. All right, I'll drop the matter of Orsted can be trusted or not, at least for now. Are you sure? Continuing our debate won't do any good, will it? And it seems like you trust him. I shrugged. Yeah, true. We'd just have an endless verbal tug of war if we kept at it. Sylphie took a deep breath, straightened her back, and fixed her gaze on me once again. More importantly, I think we should discuss what your plans are. How do you, or rather, how does Orsted intend to make her king? Sylphie was being unusually serious. Right now, she wasn't here as my wife, but as Ariel's bodyguard. It was a side of her that I rarely caught a glimpse of. Her expression, coupled with her natural boyish nature, made her look like a distinguished nobleman. For now, we intend to persuade Lord Perugius to back her. But if it's between the Dragon King and a Dragon God, wouldn't the latter, that is, Orsted, be higher ranking? Yet he still wants to convince Perugius to help us? I nodded. Lord Perugius has greater political influence in the Asura kingdom, and his words hold more weight with the people there. In contrast, Orsted has absolutely no authority in Asura. I was only repeating what the man himself told me. But Lord Perugius doesn't seem likely to bend easily, no matter what Princess Ariel says. He won't give her the time of day. Luke and I have tried to convince him on her behalf, but to no avail. Yeah, things do look pretty rough. Perugius had even refused to honor Orsted's request to help her. I thought he would have heeded any order given how much he seemed to fear the Dragon King. But I'm guessing they meant to say Dragon God. But he clearly had his own opinions about the situation. But, Sophie continued, Zenobia seems to have gotten on his good side. He even seems to have taken a liking to you as well, Rudius. I wonder what the difference is. If I had to guess, I would say it's because the two of us aren't trying to become kings, I said. Does trying to take a crown offend him or something? No. Does trying to take a crown offend him somehow? A bit simplistic, but not far off from Perugius's personal view of kings. Sylphie sighed. I wonder if he never had any intention of aiding her to begin with. No, if that were the case, he would have refused her outright. He seems to be testing her. Really? Sylphie crossed her arms and tilted her head. At any rate, I'd appreciate it if you'd allow me to talk to Princess Ariel directly in the next few days. Do you mind? Sure. I'll set things up for you. I'll let Luke know right away. The two of us will be present for your conversation. That's all right, isn't it? I nodded. Fine with me, although I would like to keep Orsted's involvement a secret and frame it as me helping because you and Luke convinced me to do so. Can you do that? Why did we hide the truth about Orsted? Since you're his subordinate now, it might give Princess Ariel peace of mind to know you're doing this under your orders. In other words, she'd feel relieved to hear that she had the Dragon God's support. However, I didn't want the man god's apostle, Luke that is, to have any more information than was absolutely necessary, even though we had yet to confirm whether he was a puppet or not. The man god's eyes and ears...
Congratulations on graduating from a Dave.
Ah, thank you!
Though that is basically just getting a participation trophy.
Black Star, thank you for the 14 months. Okay. Can we get some nyantas in the chat? All right. Where was I? The man god's eyes and ears could be anywhere. I'd like to keep Orsted's objectives and orders discreet. Sylphie paused before asking. Orsted is fighting this man god person, right? Is he really that evil? Evil or not, he tried to kill Roxy. Tried to go after you, and tried to kill me off by pitting me against Orsted. He's our enemy. What? He tried to go after me? She jerked her head around, surveying her own surroundings. Is he still after me? I couldn't say, but I doubt he's given up. In that case, I'll keep my guard up, Sylphie said, especially at night. Sylphie giggled. The only person in this town who would try to go after me at night is you, Rudy. Well, she's got me there. Maybe I should do just that tonight. In any case, at least, we managed to work out a plan for me to meet Ariel. So, Rudy? I thought the conversation was over, but Sylphie continued. If you're going to help Her Highness, that means you'll be going to the Asura Kingdom as well, right? Yes, I'm sure I will. I can't very well convince Perugius to help and then send her off and rinse my hands of the matter. Plus, I would need to defeat whatever apostle the man god had lying in wait in the kingdom. I also needed to hunt down this Tristina person, which meant I didn't even need to consult Orsted about whether I needed to go or not. Clearly, I would have to. I want you to take me along as well, said Sylphie. What? I know you probably want me to stay here and look after Lucy. I also know that Princess Ariel and Luke want me to continue living here in Sharia. But honestly, I want to help out. I have been with them for so long now. She reached over and took my hand, her soft fingers curling tightly around mine. Please, Rudy, I want you to take me with you. I squeezed her hand. Frankly, I wanted her to stay. That was probably my own selfishness talking, but I wanted her to be where it was safe, where she could look after Lucy. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those guys who think a woman's lot in life is to stand silently behind her man. It was just, I couldn't explain it, but I didn't want Sylphie to be in danger. Still, Sylphie had spent years with Ariel and Luke. Actually, dude, you literally did just explain it. I can't explain it. I just didn't want Sylphie to be in danger. Explanation received. Still, Sylphie had spent years with Ariel and Luke. They'd been companions since the displacement incident. They were to her what Richard was to me. And if Richard ever found himself in a tight spot, I would drop everything to rush to his aid. I owed him that much after how much he'd done for me. Sure, I would hesitate if I had to weigh helping him against protecting the lives of my family, but he was still one of my top priorities. I was sure Sylphie felt the same about Ariel and the others. Family was still important to her, and she knew she had to help raise Lucy. Even so, if her friends needed help, she wanted to do everything in her power to be there for them. That was only natural. All right, I said. Lend me your assistance then, Sylphie. Okay. Sylphie's face lit up, her mouth widened into a grin. It was then that I recalled what the man god had said to me, that Sylphie was destined to die in Asura Kingdom. I hated considering the possibility, but would this end up shortening her lifespan? Was I overthinking this? The course of history had been altered. Things might not go down the same way they did in my future self's diary. Still, I had to say it. Sylphie? Yes? The man god won't get directly involved, but he will use other people to get in our way. You mean like how he used you to fight Orsted? She asked. Exactly. Sylphie frowned. Then we should be wary of anyone that might be under his control. Right, but... Well, it could be someone closer to you. It could be someone close to you. Someone close to me? She blinked. Like who? Like Luke. Her face hardened. Rudy, that's out of the question. If Orsted is working to make Princess Ariel king, then the man god will try to undermine that, right? Which means he'll be trying to stop her, so there's no way he would go after Luke. Luke would never, ever turn on Princess Ariel. The man god might find a way to sweet-talk him into it. He has a way of corrupting people. Sylphie glared at me. I sensed murderous hostility in her gaze. This was probably the first time I'd ever seen her look at me that way. If Luke loses sight of himself and tries to hurt Her Highness, her voice trailed off, then I will kill him. She said it with such resolve that it sent a chill through me. This was the first time I had ever thought of her as terrifying. Neither Luke nor I want to betray Her Highness, Sylphie continued. I'm sure he'd rather die than be deceived by someone and stab her in the back. I would too. I could understand how she felt. If I ever did anything that hurt Richard, even Eris might turn on me. It was the same thing here. I see. Sorry for bringing that up out of the blue, I said. Sylphie shook her head. No, there's no need for you to apologize. I appreciate you warning me. She smiled quietly. Seeing that expression on her face helped me finally steel myself. If a time ever came when Luke needed to die, I couldn't let it be by Sylphie's hands. I would need to be the one to do the deed. That's chapter 4, guys. Time to see what you all think of this particular chapter. So go ahead and type in the comments or in the chat. Let me know what you thought. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up. For 500 bits, you can feed a poor Toby. Ah, that's also true. I forgot about that. And then we got those nyantas. Oh my god. OMG. Okay. Exercises. Prefer not to fight Toby for his treats. Did we get... Okay, so nothing at the moment other than exercises that have been redeemed. Ask Sylphie for advice on killing. She's pretty good at it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, 30. Okay, good. Looks like it's just 10 of everything. Nice. All right. Was that Rudy's first time seeing Sylphie ready to kill? Yeah, I honestly think it was. Uh, kind of crazy, but yeah. Yeah, I honestly believe that. You managed to get that death glare from your fiance at least twice a day? I mean, that says more about you than it says about her. All right. I'm going to run to the restroom real quick. I'll be right back. Ah, dang it. Ah, dang it. How long has the audio been off? damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. Okay, so I'm guessing that none of the chapter that I was reading was something you were aware of. Also, thank God I can see notifications. Okay, since I left. Okay, so great. Yeah, my mic was muted the whole time and I didn't know it because I don't think about that. You know, I muted my mic so that my chair wouldn't be squeaky and when I walked away, nothing. And then I come back and I just start talking like my mic is just working. I'm an idiot. Clearly, I cannot be trusted to do a stream. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. I don't remember what you guys said anymore. Shit, really wish something had been said before I started reading the chapter. I just looked at a few things and was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. And tried to respond to you guys. And then because it's such a fucking delay between what's live on stream and what I'm doing in real time, I never saw that my audio wasn't working, so I just went right ahead with the chapter. Great. Well, that's lovely. I kind of want to go bury my head in the sand a bit. Or more likely, I just want to fucking end the stream right now. I'm just gonna have to read this crap all over again. All right. Chapter 5, Working Together. I'm just gonna go right back into reading. I'm not gonna respond to chat, guys. I'm sorry. I want to get this over with. When I arrived at the floating fortress, Ariel was out in the garden having a tea party. Civiril was serving, but Perugius was nowhere in sight. Instead, Nanahoshi was the one sitting across from Her Highness. She must not feel very worried about her situation if she can have a tea party, I thought, but just as quickly I realized I was mistaken. Ariel wore the exhausted face of an overworked salaryman. All right, there we go. Ariel wore the face of an overworked salary. Okay. Huh. matches perfectly with the exhaustion I saw in Luke's face. Ariel put effort into pasting an elegant smile on her face, but she couldn't hide the circles under her eyes. She must be feeling concerned. The way she eyed Nanahoshi screamed, "Come on! Ask me what's wrong! Ask me!" Nanahoshi ignored her completely, in fact. Nope, I got that wrong. Nanahoshi ignored her completely. In fact, she seemed uncomfortable just sitting there. She wouldn't outright refuse an invitation to have tea, but at the same time it was clear she didn't want to be dragged into the messy situation between Ariel and Perugius. If ever there was a poster girl for the lazy protagonist archetype, it'd be Nanahoshi. The only reason she didn't flee the scene was because Ariel had offered her assistance when she was on death's door. Even if Ariel only lent us the use of her magical implement, that still qualified as help. "Oh, Rudius." Nanahoshi's expression relaxed the moment she spotted me. "Mind coming over here and sitting for a few?" I sat myself between the two girls. Siveril took the opportunity to pour me a cup of tea. The cup clattered as she slammed it down before me, which was unusually violent for someone as refined as her. I glanced up at her, and I could feel the coldness emanating from behind her mask. Perhaps she was angry about my mistaken summoning of Aramanfi. "Sorry about that." "Okay, Rudius, please go ahead," Sylphie mumbled as she took up position behind Ariel. Ariel looked a bit more relaxed thanks to her presence. I looked around and noticed Luke in the background. I had spoken with him prior to our arrival. I told him that I would cooperate with the princess, and she was absolutely overjoyed, showering Sylphie with compliments for managing to persuade me. Well, Lord Rudius," said Ariel, "it's been quite a while. I would congratulate you on becoming Dragon God Orsted's subordinate, but I must ask, are you sure that was the right choice?" Her words lacked their usual vigor. She was being vague. Perhaps Sylphie had already badmouthed Orsted to her. "Thank you. Being in the employ of someone powerful provides a certain peace of mind. That goes for anyone, not just me," I replied. "You're quite powerful yourself." "I suppose people of like power tend to be drawn to one another. Someone like that wouldn't even give me the time of day." Oh boy, she's really selling herself short. Looks like things are headed in a pretty grim direction. "Hey," Nanahoshi whispered, poking me in the side. "Orsted came to see me yesterday." "Yeah? And?" "I apologized to him, and he forgave me. Told me he hoped to continue our relationship." "Good to hear," I said. It was a short conversation, but Nanahoshi looked like all the weight had been lifted off her shoulders. People often remark that if saying sorry were all it took to solve matters, police wouldn't need to exist, but I would argue most things could be solved by a sincere apology. Personally, I wouldn't be willing to forgive someone who had tricked me, led me into a trap, and nearly killed me, but that just demonstrated how generous Orsted was. "I also happened to see Lord Orsted," said Ariel, voice as pleasant as a bell. There was something strangely charismatic about her voice that made you want to heed what she said. She was generous as well. She was gorgeous as well. Her blonde hair was more radiant than anyone else's that I'd ever met. She was the embodiment of beauty itself. I was surrounded by plenty of attractive men and women, but if you had to score them objectively, Ariel would come out on top. She was no ordinary beauty. She was like a piece of fine art. Like she'd walked out of a painting. Granted, right now she lacked her usual energy, but that only gave her the ephemeral luster of an exhausted widow. "He's a terrifying man," Ariel continued. "I only glimpsed him from afar, but that was enough for all my hair to stand on end, screaming that he was dangerous." "Ah, so she's already seen him. Probably not a good idea to tell her I was operating under his orders then, but perhaps it didn't matter. She already knew I was his subordinate." Ariel went on. "That was yesterday. He went home after enjoying some tea with Nanahoshi. He seemed to be in a foul mood the entire time, but when Lady Siveril spilled some tea on him, I didn't get upset with her at all. Or he didn't get upset with her at all." "Siveril spilled tea on Orsted? She couldn't have done that on purpose, right?" "No. She must have been so terrified that her hand slipped." The atmosphere seemed incredibly tense, yet Lady Nanahoshi had such a warm smile. Oh, no, that's her talking. The atmosphere seemed incredibly tense, yet Lady Nanahoshi had such a warm smile on her face, one that I'd never seen before. Despite Lord Orsted's appearance and demeanor, he must have been quite magnanimous and open-minded. Wait, seriously? I'm surprised to hear her say that. Maybe the curse isn't as effective on her as everyone else. That works in our favor, at least. Or could this be the man-god's doing? Indeed, he stood to benefit the most from controlling her actions instead of using Luke to lead her along. Why not pull the strings directly, since she was in charge of the whole gig? Orsted had never hinted at such a possibility, though. Maybe he had a good reason for believing the man-god wouldn't touch her. Apparently, he's only hated by everyone else because of his... Where did that sentence get away from me? Apparently, he's only... Alright, let's try that again. Apparently, he's only hated by everyone because of a curse he bears, I told her. Oh, truly? In that case, perhaps I should have said hello to him. He was intimidating enough from afar that it made my legs tremble. If I heard his voice up close, I might wet myself. She chuckled. Wet herself? Although it does feel good to relieve yourself in front of people. Pardon? Lady Ariel! Sylphie scolded. Pretty sure she just talked about enjoying water sports, but I'll pretend I didn't hear any of that. Asura's upper crust seemed to be full of perverts. There was something incredibly immoral about hearing a girl so classically picturesque talk about golden showers. Rudy, wipe that depraved grin off your face. You're in front of the princess. Sylphie cried. Yes, ma'am. I put a hand over my mouth. Did my face betray my thoughts so easily? Sure, I was a pervert, but I was really only interested in seeing the girls I liked doing erotic things. Like Sylphie, for example. Not that I was going to ask her to pee in front of me. I didn't want her to hate me. That's not a good reason. Never mind. I'm just tired of Rudy's bullshit. Nanahoshi wrinkled her nose, clearly disgusted, but I decided to ignore her. Ahem. Ariel cleared her throat. At any rate, Lord Rudius, it made perfect sense to me when I heard you were working under Lord Orsted. Oh? Why's that? Because I believe it would take someone as powerful as him to be able to control someone like you. Really? I don't think it takes much to control me. All Sylvie had to do when we were in bed at night was say, Hey, Rudy, I have a favor to ask. And I'd wag my tail like a dog, ready to do whatever. To be clear, I was not expecting that kind of stuff from Ariel. All I needed from her was cold, hard cash. After all, I was the type of man who worked for two things, money and women. You're an idiot, but I can't blame you for that one. All right. Anyway, it was about time we stopped beating around the bush. I was here to talk about cooperation, not chat about Orsted. You say someone powerful. Don't you also mean someone like yourself, Princess Ariel? I asked, playing coy. Ariel put a hand over her mouth and narrowed her eyes. Oh? I didn't realize you flattered people like that. It wasn't meant as flattery. Even though I had become desensitized to such titles as of late, Ariel's still the princess of the Asura kingdom. In the terms of my previous life, she was somewhat similar to the Crown Prince of England in status. One might catch a glimpse of her at an official ceremonies, but speaking directly to her was out of the question, let alone being able to sit with her at a table like this. That was how important she was. Her status aside, Ariel had been hard at work increasing her influence. Almost every person in key position in Sharia had some connection with her. There were the principal and vice principal of the academy, the top brass of the Magicians Guild, the head of the Magical Implement Workshop, the top administrator of a company, and the branch leader of the local Adventurers Guild. Those were the connections I personally knew about. One could invoke her name and expect favorable treatment just about anywhere you went. It was no exaggeration to say her influence could be felt at the top levels of Sharia's key industries. In short, she didn't lack for connections. She had plenty of power. I did entertain the idea of having you as my subordinate, said Ariel. You You did you? I gave up on that idea quickly, for a number of reasons, but chiefly because your power is too much for me to handle. She glanced to the side. Beyond the stunning garden was an expanse of white clouds and open sky, extending into the far distance. She stared off in that direction as she mumbled to herself, You hold power beyond yourself. It will be the end of you. For a moment I thought she was talking to me, but I was mistaken. Ariel turned her attention back toward me and explained, When I was younger I saw a play in the palace. It was a quote from the great demon empress Kishirika Kishirisu. I was pretty sure she'd never said that. It was probably a line someone else had come up with. The little girl I'd met would never be capable of saying a line that clever. When the Golden Knight Adelberon defeated her, Kishirika cursed him with those words as she lay dying, said Ariel. Huh. Adelberon became king of the humans after that, but everyone feared him. In the end, his retainers betrayed him and killed him. This play, she'd been... Adelberon became king of the humans after that, but everyone feared him. In the end, his retainers betrayed him and killed him. This play she'd seen certainly did show the darker side of human nature, but it was quite different from the history I knew. That play is always performed when one of the royal family celebrates an important milestone in their life. These milestones were one's 5th, 10th, and 15th birthdays. In Asura Kingdom, these occasions were always celebrated with grand parties. The royal family apparently staged a play as well. It deviates from history, Ariel acknowledged, but I'm told it highlights the frame of mind a royal should have. So it's not historically accurate as I suspected. That wasn't surprising. It was completely different from the history I knew. The Golden Knight Adelberon and Kishirika Kishirisu had struck each other down in battle. Wait, no. Perhaps I was thinking of the showdown between the demonic Dragon King Lapis and the fighting god. Oh well, it's not that important. What frame of mind is that? I asked. The key tenets of what makes a king. Fighting, winning, and ruling over one's subjects. I furrowed my brow. However, if that's truly all there is to it, why did Adelberon's people betray and kill him? Was the king who had this play written trying to curse the generation that came after him? When I was younger, I couldn't help having these doubts. It was only when I turned 15 that I suddenly realized, you hold power beyond yourself. It will be the end of you. These words perfectly summed up the core message. She paused and glanced off into the distance again as she continued. Too much power will lead one down the path of destruction. Thus, one should only wield as much power as they can control. If one wants to become king, they must be able to master everything they have at their disposal. Even now, I still believe that to be true. Ariel hung her head, her long lashes casting shadows over her cheeks. I'm perfectly aware that you and Lord Perugius are both more than I can handle. She wore her usual soft smile, but it looked like she was on the verge of tears. I'm going to ask Lord Perugius for his help one more time, but if he refuses me, I think I will give up on trying to convince him. You're going to give up? I asked. Yes. It goes without saying that I do not intend to give up on becoming king, but I will cease my efforts to gain his support. While his power may be beyond me, the Asuran throne is not. I said nothing, but I nearly felt like sighing. She was far too caught up on whether someone was beyond her or not. Princess Ariel? I said. Yes. What is it, Lord Rudius? What part of me do you think is so powerful? Ariel had said I was powerful and special. I had always dreamed of being seen in such a light, but as things stood, I definitely didn't think of myself as extraordinary. That wasn't even a biased view, in my opinion. I had not yet reached a level that could be called impressive. Oh, if I were to name all your incredible talents, the list would go on. I suppose the biggest one would be your impressive monopool. My monopool, huh? Well, it was true that my monopool dwarfed most people. having the lapless aspect had blessed me with an impressive one, perhaps so much so that an ordinary person would never become my equal through effort alone. I could also admit that it had proved beneficial more than once in the past. Still, an expansive mana pool wasn't the solution for everything. All the problems I faced required other solutions. Perhaps if my mana pool could solve every problem I'm facing, I would agree that I'm a powerful person, I said. What problems are those? Hard to give a concrete example since those problems are a daily occurrence. Right now, I spend every day worrying how I'm ever going to explain what's going on to my family. I was terrified of the man god and scared of Orsted as well. I glossed over the details and fed lies to my family, having no better idea of how to explain things to them. Yet Ariel said I was powerful? Don't make me laugh. I can't speak for Lord Perugius, I said, but I'm not powerful, at least. I am simply the husband of your close friend who happens to have a bigger mana pool than most people, and a lot of odd acquaintances. But I'm just your average magician, really. One who's constantly worried over something. Those were my honest feelings, so no matter how embarrassingly cliched it sounded. No matter how embarrassingly cliched it sounded. I reached across the table and took Ariel's hand in mine. Her skin was so soft and her fingers were so dainty, I almost feared they might break in my grip. Sylphie pouted in her corner, but she would have to deal with it for the moment. Princess Ariel, I did not come here today for a simple chat. You came to talk me up instead? Ariel kept a gentle smile on her face, not at all flustered that I had suddenly grabbed her hand. I sensed some exhaustion behind it, but it was an otherwise flawless poker face. If that was all it took to sway your heart, that might actually be somewhat appealing. But actually, Luke and Sylphie were the ones who asked me to come here. In an unusual display of alarm, Ariel's head jerked around as she glanced back at the two of them. Sylphie stood firm while Luke quickly bowed his head. They begged me to help you. Her dainty fingers squeezed around mine like a steel vice, exhibiting far more strength than I thought possible, enough to make me wince. The two of them said that, she mumbled. I didn't come here to look condescendingly down upon you, scoffing about how you need my help. In fact, it's just the opposite. I wondered how she would have reacted to me suddenly grabbing her hand and saying all of this if she were a normal, confident self. Won't you please let me work alongside you? A tear fell from Ariel's eyes. It was beautiful, yet strangely, I found it surprising that she would cry. Why is that? I wondered. Ariel quickly wiped her tears with her free hand. She forced a smile and said, This is the first time I've ever heard a pickup line that managed to shake me to my core. It was clear she wasn't joking around. She'd schooled her expression. Her cheeks weren't blushing, and she wasn't crying anymore either. She looked every bit the dignified princess. I admit I would be grateful for the assistance, Ariel said, nodding. However, she lowered her chin and studied me closely, trying to suss out my intentions. You are Lord Orsted's subordinate now, yes? Will he really allow you to do such a thing? I've already spoken with him about it, I assured her. Which means that you're acting on his orders then, yes? His curse didn't seem completely effective on her, so maybe it wouldn't hurt to answer honestly, but I decided to stick with the plan and keep his aim a secret. No, not at all. I shook my head. I was the one who said I wanted to help you, and he told me I was free to do as I wished. After a brief pause, Ariel said, All right, very well. Be sure to convey my gratitude to him, then. Sylphie pursed her lips, unhappy at how I'd handled things. But this was how it had to be. In that case, I look forward to having your support, said Ariel, and I look forward to working with you. We readjusted our grip on each other's hands and shook on it. Now that we have that settled, time to move on to the details. If we're going to make you king, we could enlist Lord Orsted's help in the matter. but frankly, he doesn't hold much sway in the Asura kingdom. I don't think he would be much help to you, I said, prefacing my main point. As such, I think Lord Perugius's help will be crucial. Agreed, Ariel said solemnly, sitting up straighter in her chair. Perhaps I was only imagining it, but Sylphie and Luke looked more serious now than they had a few minutes ago. Orsted had also mentioned how convincing Perugius to support Ariel was paramount, which only further reinforced how much authority Perugius held in Asura. The problem was how to go about persuading him. Perugius posed a question to us before, which was, what is the most important quality a king must have? If you can what is the most important quality a king must have? If you can bring me that answer yourself, then I will give you my support. Oh, I said, reciting what I remembered of our previous conversation with Perugius. Ariel's eyes twitched. She had racked her brain over and over for the answer to that question. I wonder what kind of response he really wants, I said. Previously, Ariel had answered they're wise, listen to their cabinet members, and don't forget their position in society. But Perugius dismissed that as incorrect. He then turned the question to me, and I answered, I think I prefer a ruler who can put themselves in the shoes of the common folk, rather than someone who relies on their own abilities. Perugius had called that response preferable, but that suggested it wasn't the correct answer either. If Orsted was to be believed, Derek Redbat must have found the correct answer to this challenge when it was posed to him. Orsted had also suggested the answer likely had something to do with Gainas, Frina, and Asura. Of course, since history had been changed, there was no guarantee that Derek had answered the same question as the one we now faced, but it was worth investigating. If memory serves, King Gainas was a close friend of Lord Perugius's, right? I asked. Ariel nodded. Yes, the story of their friendship is famous. Lord Perugius also seems very nostalgic when he comes up in conversation. In that case, whatever this quality is, King Gainas must have possessed it, correct? Perhaps. You can look into him, can't you? There should be some records about him. I thought my suggestion was foolproof, but for whatever reason, Ariel and her two bodyguards looked less than enthused. I hate to break this to you, said Ariel. What? Did I say something weird? No, but we've already looked into King Gainas. We found nothing of note in the archives of this floating fortress, nor in Renoa's library. Ah, so they'd already tried that route. That made sense. Perugius' relationship with Gainas was known far and wide. It would be stranger if they hadn't followed that lead. Oh, it would be stranger if... It would be stranger if they hadn't followed that lead. If we could check the National Library in Asura, there might be something he published that might give us better insight, but true, the best place to find information on an Asuran king would be in the kingdom's library, but for obvious reasons we would find it difficult to pay a visit to the place right now. Well, that is troubling, I said. In that case, perhaps it would be better to ask about Derek instead. How would I make such an inquiry, though? They would all find it strange that I even knew about him to begin with. Before we discuss this any further, Ariel glanced briefly at Siberil. Are you sure this is all right? Lord Perugius can hear everything we're saying. I tilted my head. And? I suspect he finds the whole thing entertaining. I worry that he may not permit us to discuss this matter as a group, Ariel explained. Ah, that's what she means. Ariel thought he meant he might want her to think on it and come up with an answer on her own. I had on... okay, hang on one second. Oh, okay, that's what it was. Cool. I, on the other hand, wasn't so sure that was his aim. Oh, come on. Let go. I glanced at Siveril. She fluttered her wings gently before saying, It matters not to Lord Perugius how you arrive at your answer. If it is the correct one, he will lend you his support. The words were left unspoken, but her tone said it all. That should be given. He is, after all, a very magnanimous person. Do you mean to say I should have consulted others from the very beginning? Ariel asked. Civeril nodded. In fact, Lord Perugius was deeply puzzled as to why you were trying to solve it on your own to begin with. Ariel smiled bitterly. I backed myself into a corner by overthinking it, I see. She muttered to herself, then stood up, her spirits renewed. She lifted her arms, catching her blonde hair on the way up. It fell back across her shoulders, and she stretched, hands clasped in the air, and then cracked her neck and clapped her cheeks. Not the kind of behavior you'd expect from a princess. Sometimes people could limit themselves by overthinking. They were often burdened by the belief that things had to be a certain way and that there were no alternatives. Those preconceptions and biases often led people away from the correct path. It was only when a person realized they were mistaken, when they realized there were several ways of accomplishing the same thing, that their field of view expanded and let them feel freer than they'd ever been. I had experienced something similar when Roxy dragged me outside for the first time. "All right," Ariel declared. "Sylphie, Luke, take your seats. As you command. All right." The two happily settled at the table, which only made Nanahoshi feel even more awkward. "Now then, let's begin our meeting," Ariel said, exuding the same confidence I had seen from her when I first met her. Should I start clapping? No, I better not. Weird Japanese tendencies. Instead, I raised my hand and said, "Before we begin, I would like to make sure we're all on the same page. Do you mind?" "Same page?" Ariel echoed. "What I mean to say is, I don't really know much about you, Your Highness." "I suppose not. Well, what is it you wish to know?" Her cheeks flushed and Sylphie stared meaningfully at me. "Oh, come on. I'm not asking for vital stats here. I'm trying to have a serious conversation. First, if you wouldn't mind sharing, I would like to hear why you want to become king." I knew she wanted to become king, but I had only picked up on bits and pieces about her motivations. She mentioned something about how many people had died for her. I assumed Derek was probably one of them. "I'm fairly certain I already told you what my motivations are," said Ariel. "What? You did?" "Yes, when you and Sylphie got married." "Is that right?" "Well, I'd like you to remind me regardless. I told you that I wouldn't be able to face the people who believed in me and died for me if I didn't become king." I nodded. "I see, so you're doing it for the people who sacrificed themselves for you. Could you tell me more about these individuals?" She smiled and tilted her head. "Is that somehow relevant to our current problem?" Ah, I know a look of rejection when I see it. She doesn't want to talk about it. "I don't know if it has any relevance or not," I confessed. "But from where I'm standing, it seems like Lord Perugius is testing you. In that case, maybe if we dig through your history and motivations, we might find clues that will lead us to the answer we seek." "I see what you mean." I was just throwing that out as an excuse, but it actually made some sense. Frankly, I had no idea what made a true king, or whatever Perugius wanted to call it. I knew squat about kings, aside from what I'd read in a novel long ago. I remembered a line that went something like, "A king lives for his people." No, it's more than that. He exists to guide the people. My ignorance on the topic meant that racking my brain over the question wouldn't be very productive. "Very well. I should warn you that there were many who died. We lost an especially great number after we fled Osra, 13 to be precise. The 4 knights were Alistair, Callum, Dominic, and Cedric. The 3 mages were Kevin, Johann, and Babbitt. My 6 retainers were Marceline, Bernadette, Edwina, Florence, and Corinne. I doubt I will ever forget their names as long as I live. Our journey was brutal. We fought together and overcame so many obstacles. Every single one of them desperately desired that I become king, and died trying to make that happen." "Wait, what? Derek isn't even among the names she listed? That's odd." Orsted had mentioned that Derek had died, but Ariel hadn't even brought him up. Maybe he wasn't that important to her. Perhaps he would have learned to clue from the 13 she just mentioned had he been alive. "Tell me more about each of them," I said. "Very well. It will take some time. to do so. Are you all right with that? I nodded. I don't mind. Every single one of them must have been important, so I would hate to skip any of them. As soon as I said that, the atmosphere became less tense. Ariel grinned as Luke gaped in surprise. For whatever reason, Sylphie appeared to be smiling proudly. Nanahoshi was the only one who seemed uncomfortable. All right, in that case. Ariel slowly began opening up about the 13 people she had lost. She filled me in on where they were born, how they were raised, and how she came to meet all of them. Or meet them all, sorry. She also went into their likes and dislikes, their personalities, what they were most proud of, and what conversations they had, what made them laugh, what made them angry, and what made them cry. She spared no details, even told me about who got along with who liked who, and who hated who. Finally, she explained how each of them died. Each person had their own share of drama, but they were all real people who had lived and died. The conversation told me all I needed to know about each of the 13. Sylphie and Luke also chimed in here and there with their own recollections of the deceased. All three had a wealth of information they could share about the group they lost. So well did they remember them. I suspected the two other girls that saved Ariel, who weren't currently present, could do the same. Oh, served Ariel, not saved. Sorry. My future self said Sylphie left to join Ariel because she'd become disenchanted with him. But I personally wondered if she wouldn't have left regardless. The bonds shared by the group were so strong I couldn't discount that possibility. I was honestly a little jealous. They gave their lives for Ariel, died protecting her. The weight of that was something I knew all too well, and I thought it was a good thing that Sylphie knew it too. That is all, said Ariel once she was finished. Interesting. Sadly, nothing she'd said seemed related to what it took to be a true king. In a way, the bonds she had with them seemed evidence enough to me that she was fit for the role. King Arthur's Round Table also had 13 seats after all. Okay, sure, if you include the survivors, it doesn't actually come out to 13, but still. Oh, goodness, I did forget someone else who was very important, said Ariel. This is what I was waiting for. It's got to be Derek Redbat. See, I knew it! This is what I was waiting for. I kept quiet, waiting for her to go on, but Ariel merely drew her brows together as her face scrunched. What's the matter? I asked. Oh, it's just... To tell you the truth, I suddenly realized that I didn't really know him that well. Ugh, great. So he kicked the bucket before he got close with her. That was a problem. She might have had more to say about him if, as in the original timeline, the two had fought side by side and built trust as they both put their lives on the line. But alas, she didn't. If the two had built no memories together, then she wouldn't know what kind of person he was, and I wouldn't be able to use that information to figure out how he managed to sway Perugius. Do you remember anything about him at all? I asked. Doesn't matter if it seems insignificant. You said he was someone important, so there had to be something, right? My only opinion was to push her for answers. Or my only option was to push her for answers. Let's see. He was a very serious and professional person. Ariel continued adding some details, but he sounded pretty, well, normal to me. Just your average smarty-pants magician. He was a nitpicking busybody, the type that always sighed in exasperation at his friend's antics. When Ariel went off and did things on her own, he looked at her with a judgmental eye and called her out on it. The picture she painted of him reminded me of Cliff, or perhaps he was more like Vice Principal Genius. At any rate, he was basically the equivalent of a nosy grandparent always fussing over Ariel's future. At the time, my behavior was not befitting one worthy of sitting upon the throne. I lived an indolent lifestyle. I didn't even dream about becoming king. That was when the displacement incident happened. A beast suddenly appeared and Derek died protecting me. His last wish was that I become king. That was why I started down this path. I see. Nothing she described told me about his frame of mind or what he was striving for, which was unfortunate because she had told me more than enough about the 13 that died on her journey here. This conversation hadn't yielded any hints either. There has to be something, I thought. some way to draw out the information I need. As I was humming to myself, contemplating a solution, someone suddenly spoke up. Come to think of it, he never doubted that Princess Ariel would be the next king. He took every opportunity he could to suggest that she should take the throne, Luke said. He struck a sultry pose, putting his hand to his chin as he recalled what he knew. Perhaps he knew the answer, knew what makes one a true king. That would explain why he was so confident that she would become king. Because he knew she possessed that quality. Good job, Luke! It made sense when I thought about it. Luke, like Ariel, had been close with Derek. But I have to be careful about what he says. It's possible he's only sharing this based on the advice he received from the man-god. It was best to assume that anything Luke suggested might be dangerous, even if the man himself meant no harm. Interesting. That's certainly as possible, Ariel said. She nodded as though the words Derek had said to her finally made sense with this added context. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, Luke reminded her. Everyone went quiet. We had no way of knowing what Derek was thinking. As the silence stretched, the atmosphere grew heavier. Perhaps we had spent too much time dwelling on those lost to us. Well, at any rate, let's keep thinking on it and see if we can come up with other clues, I said. My words did nothing to alleviate the gloomy air that had settled over the table. In the end, we came to no constructive opinions that day. And that's chapter 5. I'm going to take a look at the stream. Aside from Osira Nobles, everyone. Oh, God. What? Okay, not an idiot. Dave, what is worse? Cool. Okay. Yeah. How old is Rudy at this point in time? Mentally, maturity-wise, or as old in this world? I think he's like 20. Like, he's pretty close to 20 at this point. At least 18 or over, physically. Keep forgetting that Ariel is also a raging pervert. Oh, yeah, she's totally. Okay, so he's 18. Okay. Oh, that's right. He's probably 20 around where I am in the books. That's right. Hi, Drew. Thanks for lurking. For those who don't remember, Derek died when Sylphie fell from the sky. This is where the light novel diverges from the web novel. In the web novel, simply remembering Derek was enough for her to answer Perugius correctly. Oh! I gotta say, I kind of like this one better than. I like the light novel version better than. Because her just remembering and then suddenly answering, that seems dumb. Also, guys, keep in mind that if there's any audio issues, please hit up Rage, and Rage hit me up on Discord, because when I start reading the chapters, I purposely bring OBS up so that I don't see chat, because I tend to get distracted by chat when I'm looking over at it while I'm reading. I am easily distracted by shiny new things. And yeah, that's basically it. So if I need to be contacted about any issues with the stream, please do so through Discord. Jesus, I'm going through water really, really fast. All right. This is the 4th gallon that I've had since Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm going through a lot of them. Yeah. And I'm almost done with this gallon, and I opened this gallon up this morning. So I'm going through almost a gallon a day of water, dude. It's crazy. Oh. I didn't know today was the 13th. I haven't been paying attention. I've just been kind of... Yeah. 3 days. Tuesday. Okay. And Tuesday is going to be the 16th. The web novel lacked a lot of context. Yeah, that's true. So, I wouldn't go so far as to say that the web novel is a superior version. I think the light novel is more superior because you get more time to kind of let things breathe, and you can. Uh, I would say that probably for Rafinote, the light novel is probably the truest form of the story he's trying to tell because he has more time to kind of he's looked at kind of what he's put out there, and it's kind of like I'd say the web novel is more akin to a fourth or fifth draft, and then he looks at it, rereads it, and he's like, I don't think I did this right. Let me go back and fix it. As a writer, that's how I look at it. Like, I'm looking at my seventh draft of chapter 1 of Infinity's Light and going, all right, the characters weren't up to what we initially wanted because the ideas we had about the characters, the characters didn't have as much personality. They were kind of like one or two dimensional characters, and now they're much more detailed. Like, I have a clearer picture in my head of how each of the characters are, their past. I didn't have like a clear background for each of my characters, and then the moment I started creating backgrounds for these characters, like specific backgrounds, knowing what their backgrounds were, what is the factor that drives them, those kind of things, like why do they behave the way that they behave, what is the underlying reason why, what is it that they want, what is it that they're afraid of, what is it that they hate. Like, as soon as I could answer all these questions about each individual character, how I viewed that character completely changed. So I'm going back and looking over stuff that I've written before for like Infinity's Light, and it's complete. Like, I realize I need to, not everything has to change, but I need to do an overhaul of each chapter. Yeah. Was the general story and the characters are fully fleshed out in the web novel too, but the details of the plot are expanded. Uh, Again, I would saying that I, I I would argue that is not the case. I would argue against what you're saying there. I'm gonna view it from the thing I just described. This is the web novel is a published draft. I'm not saying that a lot of thought didn't go into it. No, I did not read the web novel. Pardon me. But I'm also going to sit here and tell you that a fifth draft of a story can be very detailed, and the overall plot does not change. So I'm telling you that what you're describing to me is essentially close to a final draft. Like, it's not quite a final draft, but it's close to it. So I would say, think of it like this. So you have 8 drafts, and your 8th draft of the story is your final draft. I would say that the web novel is either draft 5, 6, or 7. So that's how I would view it. Basically, by the time you get to your 5th draft of the story, you are well aware of how everything's going to go, how it all connects together, your overall plot. You kind of have your characters pretty fleshed out. But as you go and you read through it, you realize that there are things that you absolutely could do better. And so you start fine-tuning everything. You start expanding on things that, and I've done this before, in writing for a fan fiction that will never ever see the light of day. But I have done 4 drafts of that fan fiction, and every time I read it, I realized, okay, I need to do a better job on this scene, because I basically was just like, and this happens, because when I got to this point, I couldn't view it in my head. Like, if I can't imagine it, I can't write it. And I needed to go back and look at it. And so there are plenty of like in my case, it was a fight scene. A lot of the fight scenes, I just was like, okay, I know how I know what specific things I want to have happen, and so I write those down, but I don't have like a proper engaging description to follow those points. It's kind of like this happens, this happens, this happens. And then I come back to it later and I start looking over it and I'm like, I can do this, this, and this. And so that becomes my second draft. And so that scene becomes a little bit longer and a bit more expanded upon. And then I come back on my third draft and I look at it and I'm like, well, this is better than it was before, but it no longer works with the quality of the story that has been improved. So, or sometimes I just come back to it again and I have a more clear picture by the second or third, sometimes even the fourth draft, and I can just see it. I know how I want this to play out. And so I get into just description mode. I just go in there and I've got it. Case in point, there is a scene in what is now the 8th draft of chapter 1, which I'm hoping is the final draft of chapter 1 of Infinity's Light, that did not exist. Literally, two characters show up in a place and they happen upon another character. And then the plot ensues. I didn't do that this time. I decided to change the perspective. I was like, well, I was so obsessed. I was so set upon this idea that everything had to occur from one character's perspective. And I realized I'm writing kind of an ensemble story. There are kind of 6 lead characters in this story. So why would I not shift back and forth between different people's perspectives? Because there's going to be a lot of times where one group of people is doing one thing and another group is doing one thing, or it could be all 6 of them are doing different individual things, and everybody's got their favorites. They'll want to know what's going on with this person, that person, and all of these people think differently. They have different experiences, and so you get to playing around with that, and it changes how I view the story. So I'll add whole scenes in that did not exist before. And I did. And as I wrote this down, it may not be a very long scene, but like the other thing was the moment I decided to do that, inspiration struck, I had these thoughts, these ideas, and I was like, okay, let me start typing this up. And as I started typing this up, I started viewing things differently. Like, okay, in this setting, what does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? How do those things affect the character as they're moving through this? Are the smells a positive smell? Is it a negative smell? This, that, and the other. Like I had to, what time of day is it? What does the temperature feel like? The surrounding area, is it cold? Is it hot? Is it all these things? And based on that situation, you give descriptions of that, because it doesn't have to be like in-depth detail, but just like a comment or two about it really will help kind of get a person into that space. It helps the reader feel like they're there. And honestly, going back, I know you guys said that this library thing that we're going to be experiencing next week it wasn't originally in the web novel. And I say, well, that's a shame, because having read the light novel with the library and everything, I think this was an amazing side story and an interesting development, because not because we learn a lot of new things about any of the characters that we already know, but I feel like it fleshes out Derek Redbat a lot more. Maybe he wasn't as fleshed out in the original, or maybe he was, but like in a different area. And it's like, okay, now we bring that back into the story. If we change something or move things around, how do we do it? Okay, well, now is the time where we bring that back. Maybe in the web novel, they went more in depth about his character. Also, there's a lot of things that maybe when I originally put them in, I realized, oh, this is unnecessary. So I cut them out. I've cut plenty of scenes and uh, sometimes almost whole chapters out of something that I've written because it even though may make sense, it may make sense to have in the story, it does nothing to actually further the story. No one gains anything from it. It's just, oh, this is neat information to know about, or isn't this a funny instance? But it has no relevance to the story. This has relevance to what is about to come. It has an immediate cause and effect. Like what they're doing or about to do is going to be relevant to the story. Hope you've enjoyed this little peek into my mind as a writer. I'm not going to be so bold as to say that every writer is like this. I mean, get two writers in a room and I guarantee they're going to, as much as you'll find common ground, there's a lot of stuff that they do that's different from one another. And they'll have differing views. Put three writers in a room and you'll get in an argument. I believe that to be the truth. You get three people writing and you're bound to have an argument. Three writers together in a room. An argument breaks out. There is hair pulling. Alrighty. That's basically kind of where I wanted to go with that. I would say that the light novels are a more realized version of the a story that Raffinote wanted to tell. Am I saying it right, Raffinote? That is the freaking writer, correct? Am I saying that right, Raffinote? Or am I getting my light novel authors mixed up again? Because Fuse is Slime, and I think Raffinote is Jobless. Well, either way, let's continue with Chapter 6. Orsted's Suggestion. And that's how it went. After my meeting with Ariel, I immediately took off to meet Orsted and relay that what had been discussed. If Luke was the man god's messenger, I was Orsted's. I would brief him on every little detail. In essence, I was an informant. Rudius the Tattletale, you might say. So they already looked into information on Gaius, Orsted muttered. What should we do next? I asked, despite half expecting him to glare at me and tell me to think it over myself sometimes. Just to be clear, I wasn't the type who sought the approval of others for every little thing I did, all right? I intended to be as independent as I could, but I had only become Orsted's subordinate recently. I wasn't yet sure what needed to be reported to him and what could be handled on my own. While I was figuring out that boundary, I was largely deferring to him for most matters on our current mission. I didn't want him snapping at me for doing things without getting his input first. Also, I was asking for his opinion, not seeking a concrete answer. He didn't have to spell out everything for me. He just needed to point me in the right direction. In this way, I would slowly learn how he wanted to handle matters. Plus, I did have a suggestion handy if he told me to think for myself. Orsted and I could use teleportation circles to infiltrate the Osseran library. Where we could swipe the necessary materials. That was what I had planned if he had no other suggestions. You should head to the library labyrinth in that case. His answer caught me off guard. I tilted my head. Library labyrinth? What the heck is that? Orsted saw the confusion on my face. A labyrinth where copies of books from all over the world are stored, he explained. I never knew something like that existed. How were those books copied? I asked. A certain bookworm demon king uses the power of their demon eye to copy them. Considering that the first people that came to mind when he said Demon King were Batty Gaddy and a Tofi, I imagine this person was similar, someone who, with an obnoxious laugh and 8 arms, each one holding a volume of manga. Part of me wondered why anyone would do that with with the library, but when Orsted said it was a demon king, somehow that was all the explanation I needed. Well, it does sound like it must be pretty useful, I admitted. If the library had every book from all over the world, that meant it contained a huge amount of intel. Sure, there was information out there that never made it into books, but a vast majority of it did. It was like Wikipedia, but for magic. You could probably find information on just about anything you wanted in there. Not quite, said Orsted. The place isn't organized at all. Oh, okay. Having a wealth of information meant little if you couldn't systematically search for what you were looking for. Dictionaries only worked because they were ordered alphabetically, allowing you quickly to find the definition for whatever word you needed. The library, on the other hand, had a vast number of random books. Oh, sorry. Sorry, my sinuses are starting to go a little crazy. I'm being distracted by an itchy nose. This library, on the other hand, had a vast number of books all randomly scattered about. It was hard to guess how many hours, days, or even weeks it might take to locate a specific volume. In that case, I said, wouldn't it be difficult for us to find the information we seek? The vast majority of literature about Gaius Freen and Ossera is grouped together by publication date. It would be difficult to gather everything ever written about him, but you would still find more in there than you would in Ossera's National Library. Huh. So apparently this Demon King hadn't copied the books at random, but in order of when they were written, oldest to newest. If that was the case, it wouldn't be impossible to locate what we needed, especially in the case of Gaius. He was a great king and war hero. There had to be a ton of books about him. Okay, so where is this place? I asked. The Demon Continent, the Hylith region, deep in the Wraith Forest. And I assume we're going to get there by using teleportation circles, he finished for me. Travel sure had become convenient lately, thanks to those teleportation circles. It made me nostalgic for the first time It made me nostalgic for the time I spent with Regard and Eris, traveling from the Demon Continent all the way to the Central Continent. Very well. I'll suggest that to Ariel and the others, I said. It would be a little unnatural for me to suggest such an obscure location out of the blue, though. Maybe it would be better to say I'd prodded Orsted for information and that was how I knew about the place. I could already picture the opposition to my mention of his name, but that would give me an opportunity to flex my persuasive prowess. Orsted had likely recruited me expecting I would be useful that way. Just as I turned on my heel to leave, he called after me. Rudius. Yes? If you cannot find your answer, even after you have combed through various materials on Gaius, try this. He handed me a picture that I could only assume was the cover of a book. It was beautifully drawn. I wondered if he'd done it himself. And this is? I asked. You'll understand once you read it. Of course, if the books you find on Gaius provide the answer you seek, then you needn't bother with it. His words, while vague, seemed to contain some hidden meaning. For the moment, I pocketed the picture he'd handed me and left. It was late night. It was late night by the time I made my way back to the floating fortress. There was no curfew there, so Aramanfi led me inside as usual. He warned me that Perugius had already retired for the evening, so I should keep quiet as I traversed the halls. That means Ariel's probably asleep too. Perhaps I should have gone home instead of rushing back here, but it was too late to regret my decision. I could spend the night here and speak with Ariel about the library labyrinth first thing in the morning. With that in mind, I started toward the guest quarters, only to notice something moving in the corner of my vision. Crap, a roach? Even at this altitude, guess not even Perugius' spirits can protect against an infestation. Makes sense considering the rats I saw in the basement, but then realized that this thing, whatever it was, stood outside the nearby window. Silver light poured in through the glass, and a beautiful garden spread out beyond it. The moon didn't provide much light, but I squinted and uh, noticed sitting at the table outside. What? I squinted and noticed someone sitting at the. There should have been a word there. Okay, so who would be out there at this hour? Maybe Sivero was putting in some overtime. Whatever the case, I decided to head out there and find out. I'm having trouble reading sentences today, apparently. Whatever the case, I decided to head out there and find out. Huh. A beautiful sight greeted me when I stepped out of the building. Bathed in the moonlight, the grass glimmering faintly, guiding my path forward. It led to a patch of flowers that were unremarkable during the daytime, but took on a moon's glow at night and shone like a mirage. I could see why Siveril bragged about this garden at every opportunity. A girl sat at the table where Perugius and Ariel often enjoyed their tea. Since she didn't wear a mask, there was only one person it could be. Well, okay, Nanahoshi hadn't actually been wearing her mask much recently, so I guess there still technically two possibilities. Nonetheless, the person sat there was a peerless beauty known locally for her unmatched allure. It was Ariel. In other words, she was spacing out, or more accurately, she seemed to be almost immobile. As I stared out at the fantastical garden, why did I say it that way? As I stared out at the fantastical garden. Princess Ariel? I said. Huh? Her shoulders jumped as she jerked around to face me. Oh, it's you, Lord Rudius. What are you doing out here at this hour? Exhaustion crept onto her face as she averted her gaze. I couldn't sleep, so I sneaked out here. Without alerting Sylvie or Luke? Yes, my apologies. I simply wanted to enjoy the night air a bit by myself. I wasn't judging her for it, but at the same time, she did have people out for her life. I knew that better than anyone. Maybe that was what compelled her to apologize. Well, I said, everyone has moments like that. Even a king, Ariel asked. A king is still a human being, so of course. She went silent. I had heard that kings weren't ever supposed to show weakness, but that merely meant they couldn't expose it, not that they didn't experience it. Everyone had moments of vulnerability where they needed to gather their thoughts. So, what were you thinking about? I took a seat beside her at the table. Probably she didn't want to be disturbed, but I had something I wanted to talk to her about anyway. While it could wait until tomorrow, it seemed better to tell her as soon as I could. I was contemplating whether I'm really fit to be king or not, she replied. Definitely not the words I was hoping to hear. Well, you seem like you'd make a splendid king to me, I said. Royalty are good at putting on a facade to fool other people. It's merely an illusion. Ah, so it's something inside that's eating you up then. She went quiet for a moment before saying, Ultimately, I'm only going down this path because I couldn't face anyone otherwise. Maybe I was never cut out to be king. Maybe I would have been better off accepting an arranged marriage or whatever noble was deemed best for me and bantering with Luke as an equal, as I once used to. Her voice grew quieter and quieter. I had never seen such fragility from her before. Well, I stammered. Crap. She is so down in the dumps that she's headed in an awful direction. If she seriously starts thinking about giving up her bid for the throne, I'm in hot water. Especially since Orsted was already laying plans to help make her king. Those unique circumstances aside, I still had a fairly high opinion of Ariel. She may have been driven out of Asura after losing the political gain, but she hadn't given up. She was fighting tooth and nail to strengthen her position and create a solid foundation to pursue her goals. It had taken her 5 or 6 years to get this far, personally. To get this far. Personally, I would have quit halfway through. No, I'd have thrown up my hands in defeat the moment I was driven out of the country, just like I did when I thought Eris had rejected me. 1 second, guys. Ugh, I'm moving my feet around. All right, there we go. I didn't want Ariel to give up now. I knew that even if she broke on the inside, she would probably put on a brave front and head for Osira Kingdom anyway. But how was she supposed to win if she didn't have ambition behind it? Who would want to support a person who had no life in their eyes? The Ariel my future self wrote about must have been like this. She failed to win Perugia's support and left for Osira anyway, only to be betrayed and killed. That was all speculation, of course, but when push came to shove, her mental state might be the deciding factor. Not that willpower was the be-all and end-all, but when a person was pushed to their breaking point, their mentality could make the difference between victory and defeat. Princess Ariel. I said her name even though I had no real words to offer her. I wasn't planning to be king, and I hadn't known many kings before either. Nor could I empathize with what she had been going through. All I had seen was the mask she showed to the outside world. Whatever I said would slide off her like water off a duck's back. Lord Orsted has an idea of where we might find a plethora of books on Ganas, Freen, and Osira, I blurted out. Huh? Before you decide whether you're really fit for the throne or not, why don't you try looking through those materials and see what you find? Ariel's eyes widened. She stared at me and muttered, Lord Orsted. She gulped. And where would we find these books? It's a place called the Library Labyrinth. Let's go, Ariel decided before I could finish my sentence. Not even a second's hesitation there. You sure wasted no time debating whether or not to go. She had started turning away, but her gaze snapped immediately back to me. There was power there. Passion. I may be feeling weak right now, but I haven't given up yet. Good to know. She looked fragile as glass at the moment, but she was still a woman with her eyes on the crown. If she didn't have guts, she wouldn't have made it this far. All right, then, let's head there, I said, nodding with as much determination as she'd just shown me. 3 days later, I found myself in a building on the outskirts of Sharia. It was a different cabin from the one where Orsted had taken up residence, and inside was a teleportation circle emitting dazzling pale light. So this is the teleportation circle we'll be taking, Ariel remarked from behind me. After we had spoken, she immediately left to rouse Sylphie and Luke and began preparations to depart. I hurried back to Orsted so I could update him. He then cleaned up the basement of this building and put the necessary teleportation circle in place. This one was an inert type that required my mana to work, like the type Perugius often made use of. It's not the first time I've seen one, said the princess, but I admit I'm a little nervous at the idea of stepping onto it. She eyed it curiously. Suddenly, her gaze snapped away as she gracefully scanned the area, as if she'd suddenly realized something. Finally, she turned toward me. By the way, I notice Lord Orsted is absent. It's his way of showing consideration, since his curse would only be an unnecessary distraction. Oh, I see. I was hoping at least to introduce myself to him, said Ariel. If Orsted showed up, the three of them would probably refuse to use the magic circle he'd created. Although his curse seemed not to affect Ariel entirely, there was no telling what effect it would have if she faced it in the flesh. What a pity. Ariel frowned, disappointed. Was she just fearless, or did she enjoy coming face to face with terrifying things? Either way, I couldn't let her meet Orsted. The worst part of his curse made those who looked upon him lose all rationality. Even Sylphie and Roxy, with their sensibility and knowledge of said curse, could not bring themselves to trust Orsted. It was impossible to know what effect it might have on Ariel. She was fine at the moment, but if she was faced with him in close quarters, she would probably become so terrified that she'd keep her distance, even from me. It would be awesome if Ariel could speak to Orsted as openly as I did, but the risk meant that keeping our distance was the better option. She still found him intimidating, but she also understood she could make use of him. In fact, when I mentioned that it was Orsted who suggested visiting the library labyrinth, she hopped on board without second guessing his intentions. Maybe it was only natural. A drowning man grasping at straws, but Orsted's curse was usually so powerful that most people wouldn't accept his help even when backed into a corner. But this circle is something Orsted made, right? Oh, but this circle is something Orsted made, right? Sylvie asked. Are you sure it's safe to use this? I don't want to get thrown into a pit of beasts. Oh, are you sure it's safe to use this? I don't want to get thrown into a pit of beasts, Luke grumbled. Neither trusted Orsted. If Ariel were to deal with him directly, she might become just like them. I had to avoid that at all costs. Don't speak like that, you two. Lord Rudius would never lead Sylvie into danger, would he? Ariel glanced at me. Of course, I said. I already used it once, just to be sure. There was nothing unusual about our destination, aside from its smelling of mold and being covered in dust. Granted, I hadn't ventured very far, since the place was supposed to be in a labyrinth. Then let us be on our way. Or so I would like to say, but first... Ariel stood in front of the magic circle, her gaze focused on me, or, to be more precise, on the two women behind me. Would you like to introduce them? I glanced behind me, where Eris and Ghislaine stood. When I told the former I would be going to the library labyrinth, she lit up at the word labyrinth and asked to tag along. I didn't imagine she'd be of much use hunting down books, and Orsted had assured me that the place wasn't very dangerous, but you never knew on that front. It wouldn't hurt to have some extra fighting power. So, with no good reason to refuse Eris, I let her come along. I had an ulterior motive for dragging Ghislaine along. This was the perfect opportunity to introduce her to Ariel. Although I could have waited until I grew closer to Her Highness, Ariel already thought more highly of me than expected, so I didn't think it would be a problem to speed things up. Plus, she would have a harder time trusting Ghislaine if I waited to introduce them when we were just about to set off for Osira. I thought this labyrinth adventure would be a good opportunity to test the waters. When I brought up meeting Ariel to Ghislaine and Eris a few days ago, Ghislaine said she didn't know squat about etiquette, so she wasn't sure how to go about introducing herself. Eris, likewise, was anxious about whether her wardrobe would be acceptable for meeting royalty. Ironic, given they normally never said such things. Sylvie had stepped in to reassure them. While sighing to herself, she explained that Princess Ariel wasn't fussy about other people's manners. She also said Eris's clothes were perfectly fine, but if the two of them were concerned, she would be happy to teach them. In the ensuing 3 days before our departure, they had worked hard to prepare themselves. Eris stepped forward as she'd been waiting this whole time for Ariel to notice them both. I put a hand out to stop her. What? She snapped at me. Hold on a second. I'll introduce you, I promise. Princess Ariel, this is Eris. As I'm sure you're aware, she has earned herself the nickname Berserker Sword King. She is accompanying us today as my bodyguard. I glanced at her and whispered, Okay, now it's your turn. She started to cross her arms before catching herself and putting a hand to her chest instead, bowing her head. The name's Eris Greyrat. Her attitude wasn't the most polite, but Ariel smiled warmly at her nonetheless. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Lady Eris. I'm Second Princess Ariel Anamoy Osira. I have heard many rumors about you since I was younger. Nothing good, I bet. Ariel chuckled. True, the ones that made it to the capital weren't the most flattering. However, I don't judge people based on the whispers I hear of them. It's all hearsay, after all. Eris didn't respond. The fact that you stand beside Lord Rudius is proof they're not all to be believed, Ariel said. The people he keeps in his company may have their quirks, but none of them are bad people. Pleased, Eris nodded and crossed her arms. She stood with her legs spread beneath her, as always, completely forgetting etiquette of nobility. Forgetting etiquette of nobility she was supposed to follow. That's right, said Eris. Rudius is amazing. Good you understand. Indeed, having said that, while we may not be in each other's company long, I look forward to our time together. Ariel curtsied gracefully. Eris just stared down her nose at the princess and snorted, although she did dip her head slightly. Ahem! Sylphie cleared her throat, scratching the back of her ear. Ah! Eris quietly dropped her arms, then pulled a face as she retreated a few steps. I forced an awkward smile as I motioned toward Ghislaine next. And this is Black Wolf Ghislaine Doldia. I brought her to introduce to you in hopes she might become one of your bodyguards, Your Highness. Ghislaine stepped forward and took a knee. She narrowed her uncovered eye, staring the princess down. Ghislaine, she grunted. A pleasure to make your acquaintance as well, Lady Ghislaine. I am the second Princess Ariel Anamoy Asura. When you were still living in the Fatoa region, I have one question, Ghislaine said, interrupting. I was told if I served under you, I would be able to take revenge for Lord Soros. Is that true? It was so rude and abrupt that I wondered why she had even bothered practicing etiquette with Sylphie for these past 3 days. Then again, I could see where she was coming from. This wasn't a matter Ghislaine could compromise on. It is true, Ariel answered without missing a beat. To tell the truth, I had already laid the groundwork to make sure her demands would be met. I had told Sylphie that her aim was to avenge Soros. If you accompany me to the Osseran Palace, we will find out together who was responsible, who pulled the strings to take down Lord Soros. No, not we. I will be the one to find out for you. And when I do, please use that blade of yours to see justice done. For some reason, she shot a meaningful look at Eris when she spoke. Was that supposed to mean... Is she eyeing Eris? Is she actually interested in her? I mean, yeah, Eris does look pretty boyish and badass, but really? No, that couldn't be it. Ghislaine was the one who wanted to take revenge for Soros, but Eris had an even greater reason to want his death avenged. Ariel likely thought Eris was after the same thing and was acting as my bodyguard in name only. I didn't know Eris's thoughts on that, but if she was present with the opportunity to take down Soros's killers, she would likely do it. Well, I would too. Myself, I wouldn't go all out to hunt them down and murder them, but if there was a mastermind behind it all and they happened to appear in front of me, I would bring them to justice. Soros' death was a result of scheming to reduce the Boreas family's power. Since they were one of the 4 families that oversaw a vast stretch of kingdom land, while also weakening the first prince's influence. There were so many possible culprits that it was hard to narrow it down. I will, Ghislaine said to Ariel, bowing her head. Her tail flicked behind her as she turned her gaze to Sylphie. Well, what should I do then? For the moment, we'll have you come along as Princess Ariel's bodyguard. Please shield her from the ashes of battle. Ashes? Ghislaine's forehead wrinkled. Are we going up against a fire-breathing monster? Huh? No, what I meant was take down anyone who tries to attack her. So that's what you mean. Understood. Also, no need for fancy titles from now on. Just call me Ghislaine. Having said her piece, Ghislaine returned to her place behind me. Well, it was an honor to meet you both, Ariel said, curtsying before us once again. I instinctively bowed in response, which prompted a flustered Eris to follow suit. Ghislaine, on the other hand, merely bobbed her head in acknowledgement. The two were only acquaintances at this point, but surely trust would form between them the longer they worked together. In the same vein, I needed to make sure this first job went smoothly, in order to deepen the trust between Orsted and myself. All right, I said, let's get going. It was time to enter the library labyrinth. And that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, 6:30 is the time, and we have finished those 3 chapters. Now, next week, we have 3 chapters and a special chapter, and that'll be the end of the book. So, kind of looking forward to moving on to 17, because some fun and crazy shit is happening then. I'm hoping that by that time, let's see, we've got next week, which is going to, let's see, Okay, so next week is going to put us at the 20th. Jesus Christ. Then we start the 16th. That'll put us at the 27th. How many let's see. How many chapters are in volume 17? Let me look that up real quick. Mushoku Tensei, volume 17. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, but let's go to table of contents. Okay, so there's 14 chapters and an extra chapter. Okay, cool. Cool. So we're going to do 3 chapters, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Nice. Okay. Back to the library and then back to volume 16. Awesome. Okay. So next week will be the end of volume 16. And then we will start volume 17 on the 27th, then the 3rd, then the 2nd, or the 3rd, then the 10th, 3rd, then the 10th, then the 17th, the 24th, and the 1st. And then we start volume 18, which is probably going to be another 3 weeks. Yeah. By the time we get done with 18, I think 19 will be out. Because the way I'm going, we're going to end volume 18 toward the end of October. And by that time, 19 should be out digitally. And then November is when we will catch up on everything. And then that is where we will have to stop, at least temporarily, for Mushoku Tensei. And we'll start up a new series. I'm kind of leaning towards Log Horizon. Just because I want to start over from the very, very beginning and have at least somebody else, at least have one other person with me to join me. And yeah, it should make it a lot easier. We can do this hopefully around the same time. That would make it kind of fun. Okay. Automatically. All right. So we're going to get a picture very, very soon. All right. So, yeah, man. That's what's up right now. Let's see. Oh, okay. Coup. Just... Ah, man. Good stuff. Kind of reminds me of the library from Avatar. Gotcha. Oh, yeah. In a way. From Maganote. So I was right. It is Maganote. Okay. Time to go through and get everybody's thoughts and opinions on the story so far. Though we have kind of gotten a bunch. But specifically for those of you on YouTube, I'm curious what your thoughts are on these 3 chapters that we've gone through so far. We're about to start the actual library stuff. What things, if you don't already know, what things are you looking forward to? And what do you think is going to happen over these next couple of chapters? Because obviously something's going to have to get resolved for the book to end in 3 chapters. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think if you haven't read up already. And if you have, what are you looking forward to? Make sure to put a spoiler tag at the top of your comments so that people don't get spoiled accidentally on some things. You know, just put spoiler up, couple of lines so that the spoiler doesn't get immediately seen. And then, yeah, we'll carry on from there. That having been said, guys, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you came by and checked this out, and we will see you all later. Bye-bye for now, YouTube.